Right, ladies and gentlemen, can I encourage you to sit at the back? I did have a sort of standing joke earlier that I could put one row at the front, one row right at the back, and I reckon still people would have sat right at the back, and we're sort of looking up over there to you. Come, there's room at the front. There's room at the front. Oh, welcome. Good, well, we've made it to the fourth week in Lent. Just checking. Thank you. Let's begin as we do with just a few moments of prayer. Lord God, we give you thanks and praise for this time together. We lay before you in prayer the hours that have gone before us this day, laying especially those things which have burdened us, laying them before you. And as we lay them down, we give thanks for this time to pick up new things as we hear of your presence at work in the world. We ask your blessing on this time together and on Chris as he leads us through this time this week in Lent. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. So it's something of a first for me to introduce my big brother, who's Chris, and I didn't, as he rightly said to me the other day, how do you want to introduce yourself? We could have a whole list of things, but actually it was a period of life which I know something about, but I don't know a great deal about in Chris's life, which he's going to talk about, I think. So it'd be really fascinating for me to hear, as I think for his son George there over there to hear as well, and just hear a bit more about this particular chapter in Chris's life, which he's entitled, What's God Got to Do with Community Regeneration? Chris!
It was lovely to be here, and with some of my family here, but also my church family here as well, so it's great to have this chance. And I didn't expect to start this talk with a quote from the Bible, but as you all know, the way it works sometimes, it often happens, a verse pops up. And on Sunday, the first reading that we had from Paul's letter to the Colossians, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Just keep that in your back of your mind when I start to say some of the things I want to say. I've spoken a lot about East Leeds Family Learning Centre, but not for quite a while. I've not often spoken about being a social worker. Truthfully, it's taken me a while to own up to it, because it's not the best press job in the world, is it really? And I certainly have never publicly talked about the connection between being a social worker and the centre. And so, many thanks for the opportunity to be able to do it. I mean, a number of the themes we've already explored over the past few weeks, I've picked up by what I have to say. From the first week, our recognition following Deborah's talk, all the employment skills in this congregation should be recognised and prayed about, and the importance in the health of the Hello My Name Is campaign. And in the second week, we learned from Andrew the importance of really listening to communities, especially poor communities, and to have a genuine encounter with the poor. And the last week, the encouragement of Alan to get involved and just to behave justly. The focus of this talk also echoes the second talk, because it's about a place called Seacroft. Right from the off, by naming that place, we are already addressing our topic of what God's to do with community regeneration. Because the creation of that estate, that's at the heart of this talk, is a product of a clergyman working in Leeds. Canon Charles Jenkinson, who became a councillor in Leeds in the 1930s, and was the driving force behind slum clearance and the creation of garden suburbs in Gipton and Belle Isle. One of those ones that followed was Seacroft, and especially Seacroft, South Seacroft, which is the community in which I worked for many years. And for those who don't know South Seacroft, it's that little estate just behind Killingbeck Police Station. Those few streets, I spent many years walking through that. I imagine you might find it hard to conceive of South Seacroft as a garden suburb. But I remember speaking to a resident who was one of the first tenants who said when they arrived they thought they'd come to paradise. And because they had a 4-bedroom house with an inside bathroom and toilet, with a garden on a lovely spacious estate. By the time I started working in South Seacroft, paradise was probably the last word that you would have used to describe it. And instead described as one of the most deprived estates in Britain. Over time I learned to hate that title as the most deprived estate in Britain. It's quite good at helping us get money, but what it did was actually mask the fact that within that estate there were great people who lived in Seacroft. Initially when I wrote the talk, I started to explore the way we talk about God echoes much of the language that we use about regeneration. Of course, I understand that not everyone who was working on these projects had a faith, but then people of God do not necessarily have a monopoly on caring. But I'm interested today to explore the crossover between religious and secular language, and I want to suggest there's a thin line between them. So when we came up with the strapline, making Seacroft a better place to live and work, were we not also talking about creating paradise, or heaven on earth? When Tesco made the offer to unemployed people of a guaranteed job at their new store, it was a guaranteed offer which ultimately is about their potential to be a great employee. Very similar to the guaranteed offer we get every week when we come to the community table to share the bread and body of Jesus. No matter what you've done, you can come because I see your potential to be good. When you discover in communities like Seacroft, people with so many untapped skills, or when you find in the middle of hard-nosed commercial organisations like Tesco or Unilever, people with real compassion. And when we even discover compassionate politicians, heaven forbid, are we not also put into practice God's encouragement for us not to prejudge people by their cover? When a group of people commit to working alongside the people of Seacroft, are we not saying something about the fact that we believe in the words, blessed are the poor? In all the time I worked at Seacroft, I don't think I was ever involved in discussion about God and community regeneration. But what is notable to me is how religious words and phrases lay at the heart of what we did. Initially I was going to work through those themes, and in the process I would end up telling the story, specifically my story. But on reflection I'm going to tell the story, albeit a much shortened version, and ask you to hold on to those religious themes that I've just described, because I'll keep returning to them. I'm also running a risk that, of course, it's not my story. It's lots of other people's stories, not least my colleagues, to whom I will always be in their debt. And in some senses, I'm here a little fraudulently compared to other speakers, because I'm no longer involved in community regeneration. Indeed, the East Leeds Family Learning Centre, the old Foxford school that I managed from its inception, is demolished. Not a great endorsement, but in its day, was regarded as the iconic project, the national reputation, and which influenced regeneration policy and projects well beyond Leeds. I remember well a day when I was entertaining Sir Lee Lewis, a permanent secretary at the Department of Work and Pensions. I'm sure you all know, one of the people who really run the government. It was an ordinary day in an extraordinary place. In the family learning centre, I took him into a room full of ex-Stickers employees for the tank factory, being supported to either translate their skills into marketable qualifications or find alternative careers. I led the team that went into the factory when the closure was announced. In another room, Tesco personnel officers were helping their future employees with their training. In another room, a class of more Tesco employees learning to improve their literacy and numeracy skills. It was a class to die for, full of predominantly middle-aged men learning to read and write, because there was a real purpose to do so. In another room, there were members of the UK's first second chance school, receiving intensive learning and supportive learning experience, often for the first time. I also took them to Leeds' only early years centre of excellence, providing the highest standard of early years care to children of Tesco trainees and their parents, and other parents. And as we walked round, high school students would be pushed by. We would walk past the first outreach counselling service in the city. The place was full of great, locally produced artwork, and everything was free and accessible. And crucially, lots of people were learning, many for the first time since leaving school. I do not know whether you've ever been an adult who is admitted to someone else for the first time they can't read or write. It's a truly cathartic moment. We created a place where people felt safe to say those words. The place had what I called a say yes culture. I wonder whether you've heard that before. Come as you are, whether you be a tax collector, prostitute, sinner. Probably the one red line for me, as manager of the centre, was I was very assertive, to put it mildly, with my team about the fact that my team had to say yes. That if a young mum had walked across the path into the centre, full of her fears about learning, carrying with her all the scars of her life, often with a couple of children clinging to the pushchair, that whoever encountered her, they had to both welcome her and do their very best to say yes. And low betide them if they said no. I gave them a caveat. If they thought they had to say no, they would need to come and find me and ask me whether we could get the resource they needed. The key thing is everybody brought into that culture, which was reflecting the way they behaved to each other and the people coming to the centre. And for my part, my job was to make sure I supported them to be like that. It was a place full of ordinary people doing quite extraordinary things. I think it remains the case that Leeds City Council has only ever once won a local government agency award. The Oscars, really, the local government world, which annually acclaim best practice across all councils. And on one unforgettable night at the Grosvenor Hotel, Park Lane, the Seacroft Partnership won not just one award, but two. One for the best public-private partnership and one for innovation. So where did the centre all start from? Well, it really started from my time as a neighbourhood social worker in South Seacroft. My starting base was Alston Lane Centre, which I think is still there, but not as a centre anymore. Two houses knocked together, and in there a range of services. Wednesday morning was clinic day. Upstairs, where the babies were weighed, it was okay. But when you went into the coffee bar, there was a dense sea of smoke, and on the stairs outside my room and our room, there's three of us working there, a steady stream of people seeking primary benefit advice. In that role, as well as advising people about benefits, I still did all those difficult things that come with being a social worker, like taking children to care, helping families for their older relatives. And I was granted the privilege of being there at some of life's most difficult times, like bereavement. I was let into the lives of many people on that estate. So I really got to know the estate and the bad things as well as the good. There's nothing glamorous about being poor. It's horrible. Making the choice between exchanging not paying your TV licence with 3 days in prison and seeing the impact on someone of those 3 days, going to see an older person who hadn't eaten all weekend because she had a letter saying she was in housing arrears, a little administrative error. And that brings me to Pat, who I was partly my inspiration with these. I worked as a member of a fantastic social work team, brilliantly led by someone who knew the Seacroft community, because that's where he was raised as a boy and young man. We were dealing with lots of abuse, and particularly sexual abuse. Every social worker carries around at least one case that could appear in the papers. Pat was a 21-year-old mum with 5 young children, all born in wedlock, and with a dad who worked for the council. Their youngest child came to our attention because he was in hospital and he'd lost a lot of weight and had a nappy rash that started at his waist and ended up at his ankles. At the case conference, though, we heard there was a real bond between Pat and all her children, and we took the brave and risky decision that the boy should go home. I never forgot the incredulous nurse at the end of the phone. I rang to relay the decision. But we did manage to keep the family together, not least with the help of a home care worker, waiting at breakfast and tea times. The worst moment, though, came after a case conference in the January. After that case conference, the family had put all their meagre money into improving their house. There was a cold snap, a bit like we've had recently. And in those days, the water tanks in the lofts of the houses in Seacroft were exposed. They weren't insulated particularly. And when they're not insulated, they freeze. And when they freeze, they burst. I got a message to go and see Pat, and she was there by her gate in tears with a mini waterfall coming through the top window because the stop tap wasn't working. And her house was gutted. When you are poor, misfortune doesn't come in threes, it just keeps coming. So for me, when Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor," he means it. Over many years, I kept working with the family, but Pat always had a headache. And it occurred to me that whilst we were focusing on the children, that what we needed was something for Pat, something, a light at the end of her tunnel, something for her. The other thing I learned as a neighbourhood social worker in a community like Seacroft is that there are extraordinary people. As Andrew advised in the second talk, you need to do lots of listening and meeting people where they are and understand their issues. Sometimes we would hold workshop days where we would gather people together to look at an issue on the estate. The format was simple. The morning was spent talking about the issue and the afternoon was focused on what we were going to do about it with some of the politicians there. There were so many actions that emerged. In terms of the mental health day, we sowed the seeds for converting the local Catholic church to hospital for people with mental health issues. We persuaded a local cafe owner to run a community cafe on this day, and secured funding to convert a shop, and we created a bereavement group to help those people dealing with untimely death, which was too much a feature of the estate. The principle we worked on for the bereavement group was that the volunteers would only come from South Seacroft. And we recruited them mainly through the informal contacts that I and other workers had developed. Those volunteers were then trained in bereavement, counselling, and they became a fantastic resource. One of the other outcomes another day on lone parents is the creation of a playgroup. I had on my caseload someone who I knew had trained as a childcare worker but failed the final exams in the NND days. And amazingly, round the corner from her, I discovered an NEB qualified worker. I introduced them, and we had a playgroup. The best youth worker was a lad who couldn't, frankly, we couldn't work with when I first got to know him, while we were in a group for young men. But with nurturing, he became a fully qualified, highly talented youth worker. So what God has to do with a place like Seacroft is to help us recognise all communities are full of God's people who deserve the opportunity to use their God-given gifts. I then moved from being a social worker, continued to work in Seacroft, and the key development in the story now was that I started to work on what's called the Family Schools Initiative. I actually had a family schools around this area too. There was a recognition as a need to turn on its head the way the education community was working. What we had was when primary schools in Seacroft were challenged in their performance, they would say, "What do you expect? When the children arrive here, they've no skills and they can't talk." And when the high schools were challenged, they would say, "What do you expect? When children arrive here, they're already so far behind. And when you ask colleges why they weren't recruited from Seacroft, you had similar words. Again, what do you expect? So what we did was to say to schools and colleges, stop blaming each other and start investing in each other and working together as a team. So you high schools start to engage in the primaries and you primaries in the nurseries. And one of the key initiatives was to encourage parents to engage in learning. And to cut a very, very long story short, I was asked to create the East Leeds Family Learning Centre. I can date this event almost exactly because I wrote a paper explaining how it would work, which was debated on June the 16th, 1995. We talk about it in the car. In my absence, because was that the day with my wife went into labour with my daughter. And of course I couldn't attend the meeting. The truth was, there was no blueprint for a family learning centre. And when you're faced with that fact, all you need to do is to go back to all that you've learned about working in communities. And interestingly, many of those things are also reflections of your beliefs, even though they were unsaid. Our belief in the unconditional offer we receive. Our belief in loving our neighbours as if they were ourselves. Our belief in a bias to the poor because they're blessed. By the summer, we'd issued our first prospectus, remember what's this, not the first one, but these used to come around the doors and speak of. First course to start in September, we were overwhelmed by the response. And I spent the summer persuading colleges to put more courses on. Why it works was our offer, informed by experience of Seacroft. Why it works was because our offer was informed by the experience of Seacroft. There's a real danger you can patronise adult learners from inner cities. And our message is similar to this to our community. If you're not learning, you will not survive, especially not learning skills like IT and other vocational skills. We accompanied this with great childcare, fantastic study support, and information and guidance. The key point that's often missed is if you want to encourage people from disadvantaged communities to return to learning, you make them the very best offer because of the risk you're asking them to take. At 9 o'clock on that first evening, there's an almighty traffic jam being created outside the centre, just because of the sheer volume of cars. The caretaker rescued me and opened the gates I didn't know existed. It just mushroomed from there. So it became the sort of place I described earlier in the talk. My key role as a leader was to be the powerful advocate for the centre, and just to say that process, I probably upset quite a lot of people. Like people from the early years service, who came to the centre to be asked, probably told in the nicest way possible, to find 60 childcare places in 2 weeks because the Tesco store opening would be delayed. Or the university, who wanted to seek out people to travel to the university for their courses, who were both challenged to locate their courses at the centre. Or the early years person, who turned up their nose initially at, not you, somebody else, at the Family Learning Centre, becoming the Leeds Early Years Centre of Excellence. I think that any upset was mitigated by the fact that once they became involved, there were real benefits to them. My key role was to be the one who held the whole jigsaw of services together, and the key part of the jigsaw was employers, which brings me to Tesco. The creation of the Tesco Superstore in Seacroft amazingly became the site of one of the major regeneration projects in the UK. Two immediate things to say. When you say the word Tesco, it's a bit like saying the word NHS, as if it's just one big homogenised whole. The reality is that both those organisations are made up of people. And in Tesco, there's a director called Michael Wems, who ran all the stores across the country for many years. He's the person responsible for the supermarkets on Carriage Forward. The interesting fact about him, though, is on the board of the Basic Skills Agency. So when I went with a team to Tesco, and Michael instantly got what we were trying to ask him to do. And he got how Tesco, and a project like Tesco could help regenerate communities. And Tesco, the other entities, like the Job Centre, were persuaded to help create the Seacroft Partnership and to make Seacroft a better place to live and work. And on one morning, Monday morning as it happened, I arrived at the centre to find Tesco hot air balloons in the car park. The whole totally transformed, and a copy of an agreement to be signed I had written one morning on my kitchen table. As part of that agreement, Tesco were also persuaded to guarantee jobs to people. Not to guarantee them a job interview, but give them a letter which said, based on your potential we see, you will be an employee at the Tesco store, provided you attend the training course. The offer was then backed up by them seeing throughout the course actual Tesco personnel officers. It was a bold promise, and it won Tesco, rightly, a very prestigious Business Community Award. At the awards ceremony, the speaker was the conductor, Benjamin Zander, and he told the audience that when he takes a conducting class, at the start of the year, he says to all his students, you've already got an A, you just have to write me a letter dated at the end of the course saying why you deserve it. He was saying from the start that I believe in you and your potential, and that was exactly what the Job Guarantee Programme was. And of course that is what exactly we believe God is saying to us. That in my eyes you will always have an A. And that simple but profound statement, I believe in you, worked and had an amazing impact. When the store opened, 320 local people were recruited into jobs available there, of whom 243 had been previously unemployed. I have stories, and some of those people have never been employed anywhere. And of those, 147 successfully completed the training programme at East Leeds. One memorable morning, I gave out to those 147 trainees over 660 qualifications, including for IT and for reading and writing. There are, of course, the inevitable stories circulating that all those employed for this scheme had started to be sacked. And those stories shamefully were circulated at national conferences. Because how could the scheme work for an estate like Seacroft, when you know the sort of people who live there? And how could a company like Tesco behave in a way like this? A year after the project finished, we commissioned some research, and the key findings were this. More than 90% of the participants said that the job guarantee was either important or very important in their decision to go on the programme. The large majority of respondents said the programme had been helpful or very helpful in enhancing their employability and their skills. More than 90% were still in employment, 85% with Tesco. More than 85% of those remaining in employment considered their job security and job satisfaction to be good or very good. And what I have is most remarkable is the way the programme impacted on the whole community. Confirmation is in fact available from Tesco's own survey of their employees who were recruited to the partnership. Of the former trainees, 24% reported they go to the doctors less often. 26% were looking to buy a house for the first time. 66% indicated that they improved their skills and were engaged with further training since starting work. The survey also alludes to the fact that the result of the programme and other ones that Tesco are running, each week over £100,000 was being released to the public purse. This is because of savings in benefit payments and increase in payments to the revenue through tax and national insurance. Tesco replicated the scheme elsewhere, in Alloway and Leyland and Beckton and Chelston and Stockport and Batley and Litherland and Staffordshire and Bradford. And we, to equal success, and we replicated with hospital trusts and with other employers. You might want to ask why it was not replicated across the whole country. So that, in brief, is the story. And as well as telling this story, I hope that I have highlighted what God has done, what has God to do with regeneration. We may not have acknowledged key phrases we use like say yes as being religious ones. And whether the work was being carried out by people of faith and no faith, I don't think really matters. After all, to repeat, Christians don't have a copyright on compassion. However, for this talk and for our reflection on Lent, the fact that the sacred and the profane bump into each other so regularly is at least interesting. Finally, just to illustrate the point of the crossover between the sacred and the profane, there were many times I drove out of the centre, usually breaking the speed limit, and down the well-known track down to Murray House and Civic Court. You might have thought I might turn to a hymn for inspiration and reassurance, but it was always Diana Ross. I want to call the stars down from the sky. I want to live a day that never dies. I want to change the world only for you. Or the impossible, I want to live. So I hope I've shared with you, as previous speakers have done, how the impossible is possible.
Good stuff. So shall we do as we've done before? We'll have a couple of minutes to talk to our neighbour. If it's your wife, go and sit somewhere else. If it's your wife, then there's a chance to have a chat with her. But otherwise, just share thoughts, observations about the story that Chris has told and how that might speak to us, I suppose, in a number of ways, both about our faith, but also about how communities are made new, really. Anyway, just have a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back and you can ask him questions or make some observations. Okay, folks. So, observations, comments, questions? Who's going to fire off? Start up somewhere, please.
Well, shall I just say, it was a
Yes,
wonderful place to work at, because there were so many people there. I mean, I wasn't in at the beginning. That's what we've been trying to do, is work out when I went there, you know, because it was later. That was when they were moving out as well, because you're talking about the beginning, but with childcare, which I was obviously in charge of there. I mean, we moved out. Yes, we had the people from round about, but we were able, because of how our courses were, to bring people from outside. So there's like people from Wetherby coming in and getting friendly with, and they were all together. It didn't matter, as I said, oh, Wetherby, they're a bit sick. You know, we had all that as well, but they weren't. They were together, and it was fascinating to have it all together. You know, so it really was.
It was great. Thank you. That's really kind of you. The Shore Start project, which was, I mean, it was a bit maverick, and I knew it quite well, really. But what you say about bringing people together, you know, what was fantastic was that a number of the women on the Shore Start project, I mean, number one was half the people working on Seacroft Shore Start project came from Seacroft. That's the first thing to say. And then, and sort of, yeah, this is towards the end of my time as well, if you like. But then I was doing some work with the Shore Start project, not actually being the management centre. But the amazing thing was when they worked their way through and they ended up at university down with Nick Frost's course, you know, it's a proper academic course down at university. I used to say, because I worked with him as a social worker many moons as well before I became tourism. And he said, do you know the Seacroft women are top of the class? They are top. They're not struggling here, he said. They are absolutely top of the class.
They never have the opportunity.
Absolutely.
This was the point.
And this is what I meant about sometimes being patronising. I learned there's a danger that we worry about communities like Seacroft being scared of people getting qualifications. But I remember being with them. I managed to get the top civil servant down to talk to this group of local parents. And just to get back to that point that was made, what often organisations don't do is they assume that government does things on purpose. And I don't blame them for thinking that, but quite often it's because we don't actually tell government. And when I say government, I don't mean politicians here, I'm talking about civil servants. Because, again, just to say the point again, civil servants make things happen. And they have a very limited time to actually hear what's going on. And I think it's incumbent on people to actually tell them. And I was lucky because obviously the project had a very high profile, so we would get lots of people coming down. And I remember sitting with this civil servant with a whole room of women, you know, who were the Shore Start, and this woman shouting at this bloke, you know, I've done all this learning, you know, find me a way of it being recognised. You find me a way. It's not a course that fits, or you find me a way of getting it recognised. And so this notion that actually people get scared of qualification, my line in running in sleeves was, its default position is we have a qualification. By all means, if people decide not to do it, then that's their choice. But we should be, they want to be recognised, they want to work their way up the childcare ladder, whatever it is. So, yeah, some of the childcare stuff that's going on there was just great, really, you know, and as I say, I see myself as a jigsaw person, really, and I was just good at all the bits. And I recognise that if, you know, again, it's about this quality. You know, I would get people say, you have the best childcare in Leeds. You know, you might be from Seacroft, but you have. And I used to be the way I got people into the courses. I was working with all these schools, and then we had this school concert where on the face of it, they were all coming to East Leeds to hear their kids sing. And of course, for the first 5 minutes, they got me haranguing them about their learning. All these parents sitting there thinking they've just come for a nice mother. And I used to say to the kids, every time they have a go at you about that, you're not doing homework, have a go at them. Ask them what they're doing about their learning. So it's, you know, there's this continual, so that's a family bit of it. You know, there's this notion actually we're all in this together. And we had various projects going on for the family schools, we had a wonderful project where every child in Seacroft and actually Manston and all were walking around with the same book bag, same colour, same book bag. We're all together, reading together and making things happen. So, yeah, so to the child, yeah, thank you, but it's a child favourite way. Yeah.
Will Thorpe Park be something similar, like Regeneration of Tesco?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. In my time there at the council, I'm talking quite a few years since I left, Thorpe Park was absolutely on the agenda to, you know, we saw this massive development going on, and of course there's a big timeline because of the issue with the road. And so certainly when, and not just Thorpe Park, the Aire Valley project, when the Aire Valley was launched, I know I wasn't there, but my boss got up and talked about job guarantee. But there was, unfortunately, a big lag between that happening and then actually the job, all those jobs becoming available. So every time I went into the hotel, I mean, some employers got it and some didn't. Some got it quicker. You know, some the hospital trusts were fantastic. There was that won multiple awards, the work they were doing with some changes and so on. And so what was good in Leeds was they did have that connection between the planning department and the development agency, so the development agency planning and us as training partners. So we get in very early. But you'd have to do all the work to convince them to do it. And I think, you know, eventually you run out of energy, unfortunately. I think, you know, because ultimately you need somebody like a civil servant to pick it up and say, run with it. The sad thing is, the thing I feel all right about, is that nobody didn't know about this. I addressed all the top civil servants in the Department of Working Pensions in London, in a room in London, along with somebody from the job centre, and we told them how it worked. Now, it's a really good question. It's not an easy answer. It's a good question without an easy answer. But why? You know, it's all why didn't it work? And it worked because actually the offer was great. Brilliant offer. So you make a brilliant offer and you tend to get people to respond to it. You give them rubbish, people will go, oh, you know, some of the job stuff that was going on after my time was just rubbish. You know, you just sit somebody in a room making them apply for jobs continually. How do you make somebody feel worse about themselves? Just keep getting to apply for jobs and get lots of people saying, no, you can't have a job. It's not, you know, it's not rocket science. So the whole, my whole thing was actually give them something that was really, really good. It was the best childcare, best learning, best resource, and ultimately the best offer, because it was a genuine offer that everybody was sceptical about whether Tesco. I'll tell you a little story about. Sorry, I'm going to be doing this, but everybody was looking for the naughty story about Tesco. Everybody thought it was a bit of a publicity thing. They got loads of publicity. And one Friday afternoon, one of my team came running into my office and saying, "Chris, we've worked it out. We know what they're up to." So I said, "What are they up to?" She said, "Well, they're only giving them 15 hours. They're only giving them 15 hours, and they know if they gave them 16 hours, they could get their inward benefits, but 15 hours they can't." So luckily, Tesco were recruiting in my centre. So I had the store manager in my centre. So I said, "Don't worry." I walked down the corridor, knocked on Rob's door. "Rob, excuse me, why are you giving these people 15 hours? He said, "Well, you need to give them 16 hours. He said, "Really sorry, because I didn't know. I'll give them 16 hours. So, absolutely truthful. 10 minutes, it was sorted.
What job are you doing now?
Well, I'm not doing that anymore. And you might ask me, I mean, that was just something. It was, I recognised at the end of it, it's like doing any of these things, you just pulled me all, my balance had tipped, let's say. You know, we've all got our own balance, haven't we? And I was coping with this, getting, you know, I know lots of people get early doors. I'd be up at 5 in the morning, I'd spend 2 hours, notice that I didn't type, so I poor PA people I work with, I'd go in with, I remember being with Lorraine and I wrote, we were on a train late, coming back late from London, and I wrote a whole development plan on another Survey X. And I think Sue, who worked with me, I went to say, "Sue, can you type this out?" You know. So it was a very absorbing, and it's quite hard making these things happen. People don't always come up to you and say, "Well done." you have to upset people at times. If I say to you, it took the Chief Executive of Leeds City Council the best part of 4 weeks to congratulate the department training on winning 2 awards that he was really keen that we entered for. And the reason why, and he obviously entered the council for an award and they didn't win it, but we won 2. And those 2 awards were on my mantelpiece for the best part of a month. They're now in the Civic Hall, by the way, you can find them in the second level. It's a strange thing. It's quite hard to work out just why people sometimes don't back things. And I want to say this story because the Tesco chairman came one day to the centre, which was quite something really. And I took him round, and he was brilliant. He was absolutely great. So I took him into a group doing. I didn't know what they were doing, but they were doing teamwork, and he straight away engaged with it, picked the things up, engaged with them. He was just absolutely fantastic. So at the end of the visit, he said to me, he said, "Chris, you know the difference between and by the way, I don't go into the public sector's great, the private sector's public sector's no good, private sector. It's not true, any of that's not true. But what I think this probably is true. So he said to me, in the private sector, when something works, we back it, and when something doesn't work, we shut it down really, really quickly. And you in the public sector spend a huge amount of time backing things that don't work, and when things that do work, you seem to have a great difficulty backing them. And that was probably quite an astute judgment, I think, and reflection.
James had a question.
Yeah, there was an observation. I think one of the great things about that was that you got a major employer on board. Because one of the things that I experienced at school, I went to Temple Moor, was that trying to teach some young people, what's the point of a qualification? No one's going to employ me. My parents are on benefits. That's what I'm going to do, because no one wants them, so why are they going to want the next generation? So to then have an employer come in and say, we will give you a job, but to do that you need to read and write, suddenly there's a point.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's worth it.
Absolutely.
And that's what's needed is the employers to be engaged with things, because it's all well and good saying, to my generation, I'm a little bit bitter about this, the whole thing about young people, if you get qualifications, the world is your oyster. It's not true, because employers don't want qualifications, they want experience. They want all sorts of things that we don't have. And so for an employer to break that down and say, no, we'll just have you, suddenly they've got a reason to turn up, they've got something to engage them, and they've got a reason to want to come out of their situation. Because you can create as many jobs as you like, but you need to actually be able to employ people. Yeah. And it's that two-way relationship which seems to be going on there, which is what makes it...
Yeah, what Tesco... Yeah. Where Tesco really... So you're right, you had lots of employers, for example, when the New Deal came out, you'd have us saying we need 20,000 jobs. We're going to make 20,000 jobs out of the New Deal. You had other people saying, but it's pretty empty, really, as an expression, unless as you rightly say with Tesco, they had to do more than that in order to actually get people really signed up. Had they not been involved so visibly, it would never have been anywhere near successful. And everything they promised to do, they did, and more. You know, when I talk about that day arriving with these hot air balloons, you know, I did not have a clue. I left work on Friday, and somebody said to me, I got this thing saying, we'll be doing the haul-up over the weekend. And I'm just thinking, we're just going to put a bit of bunting up, you know. And I walked in this whole fantastic studio, you know, and balloons. And it wasn't one thing. You know, on a Friday, all the personnel officers would turn up. So you weren't sort of best guessing whether this person was doing all right to get onto the thing. They were just sitting down. So they could not have invested more in making everything they said to me, and even after the scheme, even before the scheme, you know, but there were. You can imagine it got a lot of publicity. So I would have journalists and other people. And there was one who came deliberately to try and find a story about how bad it was, or you know, if you can imagine the risk they took, you wouldn't need you'd need just two people to say, they promised me a job, I did everything they're supposed to do, and they didn't give me it. Never came out, because it wasn't true. There was not a story. There was not a story of somebody who had been promised something and didn't get it. And that was the amazing, because I remember there was a wonderful guy, one of the ones who'd been out of work, and he'd stop me in the corridor and he'd say, "Is it true this?" He'd say, I can't believe this. He'd say. And I say, you just have to believe it, because it's true. And so, and you know, we get hung up on the job side, but the way it encouraged people to engage with learning. I mean, when I talk about, if you're in an adult learning world like I was, you know, as I say, one of the hard things is for people, but men and women, just to say, really, people survive, as we know, or not being, you know, they manage to get through life by not reading. And so to actually say, I need to read, and I need to do something about that, it's a huge thing to say. And when you walk into classes with these, it was generally men, 40, 50-year-old men, working away at their reading and writing, you go, gee, this is heaven. This is absolute what you as an adult learner, somebody in this world, wants. And so I give Tesco a tremendous amount of chalk. You know, they delivered. You know, time. Yeah, it was a big gamble. Go on, Dave.
So it was a wonderful concept, and all credit to you. Could it happen again?
Well, that's a really, yeah. There were certain good things. I deliberately avoided being political, but obviously it was a help that it was around about 1995. I mean, you know, it started around 95, so I remember pre-Labour coming into power, briefing Conservative ministers about it as well as. But suddenly you had a new regime came in which said, I'm giving you... So what does government do? Government can't fix things itself. It can't do the micro. But what government can do is create the macro. It can create environments in which people are encouraged to do certain things, for good or for ill, both ways. You know, they create the framework in which things can happen. But ultimately, I have to say, you still need people at a local level to make it happen. I mean, ultimately what works is you have this, you know, a group of people start to engage each other and start to believe in each other and trust each other, and things start to happen. So I think you need both together. But where I think it started to go wrong was, I think, like the Employment Service tried to manage it nationally, rather than let local projects work. So by all means, because if you imagine on a macro level, the way to manage it, the Employment Service had to say to their local office, well, I know the rule says they have to be blah, blah, but, you know, if you imagine when the Tesco store was delayed, there were lots of little bits of side deals going on to make sure that everybody is still going to be okay. If they were about to come up to their 26 weeks, somebody might have said, well, actually, we don't count very well, so let's just... Because ultimately, you're going to get a job. So I'd say yes, in one sense, Gene, you do the macro bit, but locally you need it. Yeah, I think that ultimately, if we go to the counselling service, it's Eric.
Yeah.
Eric knows me, I know Eric.
Yeah.
He's spoke to somebody down the way. We just say, this is really important to have. And those things, and so those, it's having the macro and the micro as well. And it's, you see, all the courses are free, and you might think that was just, again, somebody was shifting money around. Well, actually, it was quite clever. It's an easy move. Most people would fee waivers anyway. So just by saying, you know, it's free, you take away that barrier and make, you know, and yeah, I think it's sad now that we've made, I wish people were still more inventive about money, and and about, and I understand things are tight and so on, but I think we were the environment we were working in was obviously in our favour. And it wasn't like in designing I was chasing the money, if you like. I do believe if you do things right, then the money will come out. In fact, I was having to turn money down. I remember having this person rang me up and said, I can offer you 60 grand for some grants, blah, blah. And I said, I'm sorry, it just doesn't fit. Thank you very much. And so it naturally brings things to it. But so whether you have that same, all the stars aligned in that way, I don't know. I hoped you would, really. I don't think we're that special.
It takes people like you and Eric who will think outside the box to do it.
Yeah, I think, as I say, if I've got a skill, it's doing jigsaws. If I've got anything, I can see the bits of the jigsaw.
The point you made is like the grace that we have from the Tesco in the community was like really interesting, that the people are getting jobs and they are doing the good job, like just like NHS, and they providing for the family people. And even I was like just remembering in this time that the food that we get from throughout the world they provide is a kind of grace that they're doing in the community. And I remember like we went, me and my wife, to buy some food from Tesco, rice. And then I remember my dad, he used to say for me before I became a Christian, he said to me, the people working in India is so hard to grow the rice. And then they are the main exporter in the world. They provide the rice throughout the world. And I was just sitting and I was just remembering that they're providing things together in this community. Yeah. All the products that we have is a kind of like grace. And now my questions are on the change of the time, because everything they're doing, the corporate social responsibility is fantastic. They providing local people jobs, that's good. And then they are like internationally as well, they are recognizing because they bring the product and they're helping for them. As so many poor people, they get a job and they work for them to produce the product for them. And my question now is, on the change of the technology, they're changing all the system. So how they can employ the local people on this circumstance? What's their future?
As I say, I don't know what's existing out there as well as I used to, really. I don't know, and I don't know where Tesco. I know they ran it a number of the times, but I'm not sure anymore whether some of these schemes are working. I mean, I was going to go back to James' point. It links to what you've just been asking. One of the precursors to the job guarantee scheme was a thing called the job placement program. And what the job placement program did was again the lead thing, was allow people to go into employers and to demonstrate to them, A, for the person to find out if this is the right job for them, and for them to demonstrate to the employer they were a really good employer. And that worked very well, even in advance of Tesco, because it was really good. But unfortunately, I know you know about 3 or 4 years ago, that scheme was tried to be replicated again, and there was a great uproar about the fact that employers were exploiting people and all those sorts of things. And I don't think we've got a clear enough view even now about what actually makes things work. You know, I think by the time I was leaving the council, we were going the wrong way, really, in terms of the way we were approaching getting people to work. It seemed to me we'd lost, you know, sadly, quite quickly, we'd lost all that knowledge about how best to get people into work. And I guess the sad thing for me is, you know, as I say, my only saving grace is I know I told people about it, and I didn't pretend it wasn't happening. But the sad thing for me is, why didn't somebody get up and say, or why didn't the people get up and say, why don't we do this more? Why don't we do this sort of way? And that, you know, and I think that in lots of, I mean, the sad thing is, by the way, I couldn't persuade the city council to do it. You know, And that was weird, really. You know, you think, I've got into with a major employer, in a whole, with a board, all those things. Why can't you, City Council, do something similar? And they would try out things like opportunities. That's the bit that used to get me absolutely steaming mad. We're going to, it's not fair. Well, yeah, one way it's not fair. You're right, it's not fair. But so that was endemic, really. I think I eventually got to the point again, pretty frustrated, to put it mildly, as well as not very well, probably, and all those sorts of things. It was the thing that made me mad was actually it's not like you don't know. That's the thing that really I found. I'm just like Seacroft, it's worked all over this place. It was the Hospital Trust, they were doing some fantastic things, Hospital Trust. All, I know it's awards on everything, but these are all big award winners, and that means people know about it. So you can tell in my voice I was a tad frustrated at certain point about, and it's quite difficult to know why.
We've got time for one. Lynn, did you want to say?
Yeah, I was just obviously very enthusiastic about what you've created there, that seed that grew. Are those people still in employment now that you successfully put there?
I don't know, to be honest with you. All I know is I do meet up with them. I had a fantastic team, and I meet up with them quite often. And I see them, and they will tell me tales. And they saw so-and-so, and I'd be really surprised. I'm not necessarily at Tesco, because I remember being one of them, and they were working at Lidl, I can't remember, they got fed up.
It was just a springboard into
And some of them were getting into managerial roles really quickly. So I don't know, and I think it'd be a lovely bit of research for somebody to do.
Find out who's still.
But I know that a year afterwards, the number of people were there.
I worked at Tesco in the early 2000s, one of my many part-time jobs after I escaped from teaching. And I can remember that I worked there with people who had started at Tesco when it first opened in Seacroft. And they were still working there.
Well, because I think in a way, from a loyalty point of view, if Tesco did what they did, you want to still work there because you feel pretty good about it.
And they get their staff discounts.
Yeah,
I even got it
yeah. Thank you.
after I've worked there for a year. Pushing the dot control.
Sorry.
There's a story. Chris is going to. Do you want to finish with that? Yeah. There's a story to tell at the end. I just want to express our thanks to Chris for this evening, but also for that work, that period of time in his life. It's a sadness to me. It's lovely to hear. It's a sadness. I wasn't particularly around an enormous amount when that was happening, but it's a sadness when I drive down that road in Seacroft, and it's got a sign off still, East Leeds Family Learning Centre to the right, and obviously it's gone. But the sadness is, this is as an outsider looking in, that how long was it before it was dismantled, relatively speaking?
Pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly.
It's a bit like a jigsaw. If you take a piece out, it starts to disappear.
The sadness is, here's a scheme that gets people who've had no sense in all their lives having said yes to them, who are finding a job, whose lives are being changed, and whoever dismantled it can't cope with it. There's something very gospel in that word somehow, really, but in the story that we're going towards. But there's a great sadness that actually isn't something that changes lives, and we wanted to take it apart, sadly. But it also reminds us, I think, that with the right kind of people and with the right sort of imagination, I think, then remarkable things can happen, and they did at East Leeds Family Learning Centre. So our thanks to Chris for listening. In a few minutes it's going to be Complin, but before then Chris is going to finish his time with us with a story which perhaps is an appropriate ending, and then we'll go over to
Very, very quick story. It's one of my favourite stories. So we were working with all the schools in the area, and we were, first of all, we encouraged them to read, so we had a book back that went all around. And then the next year, it was all about writing. And it was an amazing programme. We had drama groups going in to encourage them to write. And the promise at the end was, once they'd written, we would publish their work. And so we had this, this massive thing going on. And then we got to Easter, and the whole hall, it was a new Easter, it was a huge hall, was just full of kids' work. Massive work all over the place. And the idea was we would publish this book called 2000, called 2009, Millennium. And we would give it to the Lord Mayor in June, for Easter, and we'd give him a copy when he was down at the Millennium Dome, famous Millennium Dome. And so it worked away. Then there was a slight issue, which was how to get it published properly, not like a little, an absolute top thing, you see. And I was working, we talked about Tesco, but the guy at Lever Fabergé, I worked with Lever Fabergé as well. And I got to know a guy called Tony, and he got the vision of what I was trying to do, and he became the sort of person that I could ring up and say, Tony, I need some help publishing this book. And he'd say, well, how much help do you need? I said about £17,000. And so he said, okay, that's fine, you got that. And so he did it, and so we produced this book. And on one day, we went up to Lever Fabergé to do it, and then we went to various other venues. And then there's this fantastic thing where we went to Waterstone's bookshop down in Leeds. And the Lord Mayor came to the Waterstone bookshop. And seeing these Seacroft people walking down about their books, and all during the day, I was accumulating signatures of all the authors of this book. And so I have here all the authors, well, not quite, but a fair number of them, as we were going round. And it was just a fantastic, because it was about saying you can do amazing things, because you're amazing people. And there's just two poems I just need to read you, just because I think they're just saying what it's all about, really. And there's one poem about the Seacroft store. Seacroft had an old grey centre with some banks and ambulances, post office and co-op. You could hear people talking in the shop, selling mops and dolls, school cardigans and chrysanthemums, what a great word. But the centre's gobbled up in big bites. We will have a superstore, and one if it'll still sell mops. I loved to enter at the centre. It felt so grand to buy little spuds. I think it will be a lovely place, with lots of glass and talking space, with Tesco and the Green. It's finished, all new and seaside clean. Amazing. Young, I don't know how old that person was. And then, I'll stop. But then there's another one called My Dream, which went like this. My dream. In my dream, I saw a world I could never imagine. Trees were made of chunks of gold, with leaves as shining rubies, birds twittering, buzzing bees bouncing from flowers, the streets are clean and litter never seen, telephone boxes with panes of glass, the first ever put, telephone boxes with panes of glass, the first I've ever put in, and letterboxes full of letters saying wonderful things. There we go. Thank you.